Well, Mark, welcome to Long Blue Leadership. This is truly an honor as your classmate, class of 99. We go back, 30 years.
It is It's so exciting to see you again after
Always.
all this time, and to
Yes.
be here at USAFA to have this conversation is just priceless. So thank you.
Who knew we'd be doing this many years
That's
later?
right. That's right.
Many may not know you've been in security forces. As an active duty officer, you went into the FBI, and you've really been in this public safety kind of realm. But we're going to dive in with, I think, a moment in time that really shaped you, and just in something I learned about you just recently. So you're 5 years old, and you shared with me that your dad actually, he took his life, death by suicide, right? And it shaped you in a way when you're thinking about your role in public safety. Do you mind kind of sharing that with us?
When I was 5 years old, my dad died by suicide, and I was an only child, and he was my absolute hero. He was a local police officer, so my earliest memories of childhood were wearing his uniform and seeing the squad car and being around officers. And I think that really solidified my future in public safety.
Your hero, something that you were exposed to. Tell me, as a 5-year-old, what did that start to look like? Where did you see that show up in school, in your sports, like just in the way you lived? How did you navigate that?
So quickly, I had an extended family. As I went to the playground and were around town, squad cars would show up. And police officers would come by and, give me a pop or come in and check with me and see how I was doing and see how my mom was doing. And that really laid a foundation for me of a sense of an extended family, of the police department being more than just a job. And the balance of that sense of camaraderie and togetherness with the mission, I think really shaped my childhood. I became very, very active. And I don't know if that was by design or divine intervention or what, but it was kind of, the object in motion stays in motion. I was on the run, literally on the run, loved to run long distance. I quickly got into Civil Air Patrol as soon as I was old enough to do so, and got exposed to the Air Force that way. I got my private pilot's license at 17. I soloed before I got my driver's license. And was destined to come to the academy.
Wow. I mean, you're accomplishing so much so quickly. Were you always like that? Did you see others in your life like that? Was your dad that way?
It's interesting in retrospect to see if that was inherited or that was kind of a response to the trauma. I kind of think it was a response. I'm the only person in my family to have moved outside of Flint, Michigan. Wow. So folks were very stable and stayed where they were, but I was just constantly moving. As we're talking, I remember I was the youngest Red Cross CPR instructor for the county at 15. I formed a canine search and rescue unit for police departments to train dogs to help find missing people. And I guess that was just a response to what had happened. And it really planted a seed in me that life is short. And I've had this drive to just leave it all on the field, to keep moving forward, to do more and more, to be able to, focus on public safety and to protect people.
So you showed up at USAFA. You knew you went to Civil Air Patrol. USAFA was in your sights. I remember you as a cadet, and you were always a go-getter as well. Let's talk about a little bit your cadet years and maybe some of where you saw that evolution of yourself as a leader, but also maybe how it showed up through, go-getting and continually pushing that.
My first setback was I wasn't initially accepted. I got a Falcon Foundation scholarship. And it was really a fork in the road decision. Do you kind of take a year off and go this route and reapply, or do you go another route? I ended up going, obviously, the Falcon Foundation route, went to Marion Military Institute, and I'm so glad I did because it set me up to be a cadet and to be in the same class as you. That cadet experience is just such a sensory overload. I wasn't an athlete. I joke that my athletics were just kind of graduating. Like I just needed to focus on on the academics, and surviving the day. Yeah. But then I started to see some kind of opportunities to give back, and I kind of see these themes throughout my life. myself and 2 of our classmates formed the Cadet First Responder Team back in '97, I think. And that was really just, again, interest in public safety and a recognition that we needed some more kind of support for cadet-related activities, 24/7. We've got the fire department and EMS here, but to understand the cadet experience and to be able to help out. So my sponsor was a paramedic in Colorado Springs. I did a lot of ride time with him. And
that
we
kind of
up,
worked out really well.
Yeah, it sure, again, divine intervention.
Yes.
And so we formed this team. We got our EMT certification on nights, and we're able to help out and provide practical experience. If you remember, the class of 2001 was absolutely decimated during recognition. Remember, we had to have a timeout. We had to have a timeout
yes.
to say, look, like we got to rein this in. And so we were able to provide a lot of support there. But as I progressed in the academy, public safety, protecting people continued to resonate with me, and was one of the reasons I chose behavioral science as a track.
Not
partly
because you didn't love math and
well,
science.
I was saying partly because I probably wouldn't have graduated.
Yeah, I was right here, social sciences.
So
yeah. Yes.
You got to go where you're strong, right?
That's right.
But I knew that regardless, we'd be working with people. And then to tie it back to my dad, to understand why somebody with a family would take their own life was still something that I was struggling with. And so that really led me to a psychology track. But this drumbeat of public safety really continued to resonate with me. And it's really the main reason that I chose security forces as a career field. I mean, I was medically qualified to fly, already had a private pilot's license.
Right. That was actually what I was going to ask you, because you had that.
Yeah, partly because although I have my license, I get horrifically airsick.
Okay.
Which is a weird dynamic.
And yet you kept pushing yourself.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
yes.
if I'm flying, I don't get sick, but if I'm a passenger, then I get sick. So I didn't want that as a career choice for me, but I wanted to lead people where they were. I wanted to lead on the ground in the public safety space. And so that's why I chose security forces.
So let's talk about that a little bit. As a security forces officer, you saw many things, I'm certain of it. But was there a moment when you actually had a leadership kind of moment for yourself that you grew different from when you're a cadet, but in the moment leading some security forces, men and women? Was there a moment that you grew that way?
Yeah, I think right out of the gate, because as soon as you're a second lieutenant in security forces, you are leading airmen.
Right.
So my first assignment was at F.E. Warren as a nuclear weapon convoy commander, a team of 40 airmen. So there's no diffusion responsibility. There's nowhere to hide. Like, you are it. And that was the first practical application of leadership for me.
Okay.
Theoretically, and within the cadet wing, you're kind of in this microcosm to test some things out and develop who you're going to be as a leader. But once you hit the ground, like, that is it. And to be able to motivate, inspire a team of people in a mission to protect nuclear weapons when there hasn't been a direct attack in our history, it is difficult. But now I look back as a 23-year-old lieutenant running a nuclear weapon convoy with the world's most important weapon on the open highways is an incredible responsibility. But that's really, I think, where the rubber meets the road, where you start to see what leadership looks like for you. It's not the same for everybody, right? You take bits and pieces of people and in theories and apply really what the moment requires. And in security forces, you really start to see the value of the senior non-commissioned officers. And although you have the authority, they have the reputation and the ability to deliver. And so it's more art than science. And so I learned that very quick, right out of the gate.
That makes a lot of sense. And something that you said, I think is really important, that human piece of it. When I think about the pace in which security forces and a lot of our law enforcement roles live in, my question for you might be, how did you help those handle kind of challenging moments or stress, right? You kind of go towards give me more, take on more, stay busy. Not everyone is wired the same. So did you have airmen that struggled in how they dealt with, things, trauma, et cetera? And how did you coach or lead them through that, really?
Back then, there really wasn't a lot of support.
Right.
There really wasn't a recognition. There was still a stigma, both in the military and law enforcement, of I can't disclose that I'm having a problem. You're going to take my security clearance. You're going to take my weapon. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to be embarrassed. And so at that time, there really wasn't a safety net or a openness to discuss it. So you kind of just dealt with it. So it was more of telegraphing as a leader of what your values were in hopes that people would kind of, reach out if they needed help. In my time in the FBI, I was able to influence decisions and policies to be able to be more accommodating, to kind of focus on the whole person and look at, our individual followers as a function of performance, as opposed to, you're my responsibility when you're in uniform from 9 to 5 and then you're off duty. Life is not my concern.
As a leader, there are times when you're leading folks and you might have the authority to do some things. Did you start to implement some of those programs or support resources, et cetera, as an agent, or when you were at a higher level authority in the FBI?
It was at a higher level. So, one of the reasons I left the Air Force after 6 years, it was a tough decision. And it wasn't running away from something, it was running towards something. And I recognized, when we were company grade officers, the trajectory is kind of baked in. You will continue to promote, but you will lead people. I wanted to do the work. I didn't want to just lead the people doing the work. I wanted to do the work for myself. And that was, one of the reasons I joined the FBI. But going through as a case agent for 13 years on a violent crime squad and being exposed to some of the different things that my dad was exposed to, that others were exposed to, it really laid a foundation as I pursued leadership to be able to have greater influence as I moved up the organization to set that culture towards mental fitness and resilience, and really as a function of optimizing performance.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? Tell me what you mean by mental fitness and resilience.
So, law enforcement and military both over the past 20 years has made significant progress in kind of chipping away at that stigma. We're not where we need to be yet, but we're making really, really good progress. I equate our work to that of an Olympic athlete. It's not just running the race. Olympic athletes are obsessed with their craft, yes. Whether it is nutrition, sleep, mental imagery, different types of runs to test different types of muscles and stamina and endurance, but they look at the whole person. So too should we in law enforcement and in the military. So as I got into leadership positions, you kind of block and tackle for your people and let them run. And you set the trajectory of your unit, your squad, your team, your division, your organization, on how they move forward. And so I really push that whole person concept, that you are a whole person, not just your 9 to 5, but you're off duty, you're on duty, you're past, you're present, and all of that needs to be optimized for you to perform the mission. I was very fortunate at our entry-level senior executive service position to be at our headquarters and be responsible for, it's called our employee health and performance section, but the clinical staff at the FBI, the psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, nurses, social workers, to be able to drive that culture and to move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. And I needed to experience that as an agent. I needed to be on mass casualty scenes. I needed to be engaged with victims of crime to understand what that looked like, what that felt like, to project what my dad had experienced, but to recognize as humans, we are not wired to see what we are requiring our people to see and do time and time again. And we just require them to go out. And so to provide mental health counseling, which in the FBI we do not only for the employee, but for their spouse, which I think is very important, and kids for that matter, to be able to recognize that, you're not superhuman. It's okay to not be okay. You're not going to lose your clearance and you're gone. People that lose their clearance do so because they compensate in maladaptive ways, whether that's drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And so that's been rewarding to drive that culture, to push the creation of employee assistance counselors. These are mental health practitioners, chaplains, peers, just to be able to let that culture permeate and to be able to demonstrate from the top. I'm very open about my dad and how that has shaped my life, to be able to telegraph that, post-traumatic growth is possible. And there are a variety of resources out there now. And there's science and research, and there's just a recognition that the way that we are wired You can't just keep going 100 miles an hour. You've got to go back to being that Olympic athlete and have a rest in a work and schedule, and to be able to push yourself and to relax and just think holistically.
The term itself, post-traumatic growth, is one that I'm not familiar with, but when you explain it that way, it's very clear. And my question to you might be, how have you, for yourself personally, you're a husband, you're a father, you have seen things, and then you go home. And, while you do have counseling for family members and for, yourselves as well, what does that look like, this post-traumatic growth, when you go home personally?
It's really tough to practice what you preach. We're really good about setting a vision for an organization as leaders and taking care of other people, but not taking care of ourselves. And what really flipped the switch for me was reframing the perspective on telegraphing for others to create the permission structure that it's okay. And when they see you do that, then they know it's okay. So for example, in FBI culture, same for the military, like if the boss is in the office, you got to stay there, or you got to be there till 5 o'clock. That's fine if you have work to do, but what sense does it make to sit there just because, your boss is there? So one of the things that I did as I approached senior leadership was I left every day at 4 o'clock. And I made sure they saw me leave. And it's not, I'm going out to go play golf or whatever, but I am going back to be with my family. And in all the assignments I've had, I've moved several times in the FBI, I've made it a point to be home for dinner. And that is the stability for the family, for my girls, for me. And we'll have our dinner and put the kids to bed, and I'll get back and do more work. But being able to telegraph that. I was the special agent in charge of our Denver field office. And as you move into the senior ranks, it's an incredibly lonely job when you are at the top. There's nobody you can talk to. You can't gripe to people below you. You've got to have a strong peer network. And you've got to put on, the oxygen mask first to be able to help others. And that takes consistent kind of messaging. It takes some consistent actions to be able to show, we're putting our money where our mouth is. And then engaging with employee assistance counselors. I talked regularly with ours, and I wanted people to see that yeah, it's confidential and there's no shame in that. You would have no problem putting on your squad calendar that you're going to a dentist appointment at 10 o'clock tomorrow. We want to get to a point where I'm going to go talk to the counselor.
Have you seen the benefits of that since the agency has made some of these changes?
I have. Over the past 20 years, the scale, speed, and scope of critical incidents is just unimaginable. It's now commonplace for mass shootings. When we were here at the Air Force Academy, Columbine happened.
I was just thinking that when you brought that up. Yep.
And now it's almost every single week. And the FBI is very similar to the military in that we are mission focused. Our job is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And the threat spectrum has exponentially changed. We have to deliver. Again, there is nowhere to hide. There's no diffusion of responsibility. When I was the special agent in charge for the Denver field office, we were the FBI for Colorado and Wyoming. And whatever happened, we had to deliver. And so we're not afforded the luxury to not respond. And it takes principled decision-making in the development of culture to practice and plan and prepare and create that permission structure, because it's going to happen. And when it happens, it hits hard. And we've got to deliver. We have to be mission-focused and get the job done, but we have to take care of ourselves on the back end. And that takes purposeful decision-making by leaders to carve out that time and say, nope, we're going to take a time out.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that actual example, but let's talk about the Boulder attack. And, what was your role and approach in, as the leader, in that kind of that lonely role as a leader, but to really kind of navigate that. Can you talk about that with us?
Unfortunately, the Denver field office has had their fair share of critical incidents to respond to. So we've got our reps in over the course of time. Right. But that, performance just doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work in policy development, in exercises, in pressure testing assumptions to be able to deliver when the moment requires it. The Boulder attack happened on June 1st on a Sunday. And so many things happen at one time. Our society has changed where, it's a 24/7 news cycle. And things are happening in real time. You no longer have the built-in delays because you've got to get to a phone to make a call. And so this is happening, unfolding in front of you in real time. And there's so many things you're responsible for as the leader. I think when it comes to times of crisis, people want stability. They want reassurances. They want a steady hand to land the plane. And that's what my focus was on, that although I have the same emotions, anxiety, stress that is happening, we need to be the steady hand to land the plane. We focus the culture in Denver on direct community impact and supporting partners. I think there's a misperception with the FBI that we have to be the lead. And, when the feds come in, they take it over and, here we go. But that's not the case. We can prop up local law enforcement and to provide the forensic, technical, analytic, tactical, behavioral expertise that they may not have or may be overwhelmed due to the size of the incident. And thankfully, we have a strong relationship with the Boulder Police Department. And so the chief called me personally as I could hear the siren in the background as he was rolling to the scene. So we have plans in place, just like the military when there's a crisis, and you send that flare up and you execute the crisis management plan. And you work in real time. Everything's moving at 100 miles an hour. Being the leader in that situation, you are getting torn in multiple directions. So you have your employees responding to the scene. You have local law enforcement. You have elected leaders here in Colorado that want to know what's happening. You have elected leaders in DC that want to know what's happening, to the point where my phone broke.
Oh my goodness.
There's so many phone calls at once, like it was fried.
Wow.
And so again, focusing on, I've got to be the steady drumbeat. I've got to be measured here to telegraph that we've got this, but also a trust and confidence that your people do have it, and to get out of the way. They're the experts. I'll block and tackle for them and let them run. And I telegraphed that in our culture and let them run, and they did phenomenal. And I focused on what my responsibility was not on being at the scene and seeing what's going on. And in that, it was engaging with executive leaders to be able to understand what we have, what resources we need, and to be able to deliver. Now, at that time, given the context of what was happening overseas, we knew this would be an international interest immediately. So it could either go very well and controlled, or it could be absolutely horrible. And so that's another layer of pressure. And when you go back to the fundamentals at the Air Force Academy of when it matters most, that you buckle your chin strap on the helmet and you just get to it. And you immediately go into that mode and distance your emotions and thoughts and anxieties and put those to the side and focus on the mission at hand. And we knew when we were giving statements in the press that it would be carried internationally. So a different layer of stress as a leader. We had simultaneous operations. We had the scene. The subject had a makeshift flamethrower and threw Molotov cocktails. There was about 15 victims at the time that were transported. Luckily, he was arrested by a Boulder police officer on the scene. But we also had activity in Colorado Springs, where his house was, so generating search warrants and everything for that, and then a mobile command post to be able to assist Boulder PD. But nowadays, we're running leads all over the world, because what we don't know at the macro level is this a distraction? Is there another attack happening? Is this part of a pattern? That we've got to figure out in very short order what we have.
I'm curious because I remember the reason why you left active duty, or you transitioned from active duty to the FBI, because you wanted to be in the things, doing the things. You find yourself now in positions where you're leading. How have you grown as a leader yourself? What have you learned about yourself in this not being able to be the one doing, but like you said, blocking and tackling? Like, how have you grown yourself?
So I was a violent crime agent when I first graduated from Quantico, and I did that for about 12 years. And it was all about impact for me. So I worked bank robbery and armored car robbery scenes. And I remember this. I remember these scenes as we're talking, but You go to a chaotic scene like that with yellow tape and local law enforcement there and people crying and physical evidence and blood on the ground, and people are looking for somebody to take control. And I remember walking out of my car with that gun and badge on my hip, and you could feel it. Here comes the FBI. Okay, they've got this. And to be able to turn order into chaos, or chaos into order, rather.
Yeah.
And create, develop evidence, make a case, prosecute it, provide that sense of closure for victims. That was the juice for me in that direct community impact. But then I started to feel the calling of leadership from the military. And I started to see that as you move up the ranks, you're able to make more and more impact with a greater group of people. And that became the juice for me. And so in the FBI, it's not as linear as the military where you just move up. You can kind of go up and down or sideways. But that really motivated me to be able to give back that public safety kind of motivation in larger and larger groups of people. And often when it comes to leadership, whether you're in the military or the FBI, there's kind of this imposter syndrome of like, do I really have this? But you look back and say, look at all the things I've endured, look at all the experiences I've had, all the different places I've led all over the world, and it's turned out just fine. I've got this. And to move up the ranks and to make decisions and lead larger and larger groups of people and learn from those decisions, that was my spark. And then at that point, I just continued down the pipeline. I'm at a point now where I'm operating and leading at the enterprise level, which is impactful, stressful, humbling, and rewarding. But that special agent in charge position, that was the ideal position because you're directly connected with the people. We've got about 500 employees between the two states and are ingrained in the community to be able just to help more and more people.
So you're driven a bit by adrenaline. We've talked about this. I'm curious, what's next? I mean, you're at the enterprise level. Do you stay here? How do you continue to fill your sense of impact that you're leading or making a difference for when you've kind of continued to really, rise in that way?
At the enterprise level, it's a different perspective of leadership. You're obviously leading through several layers of leaders. So, with the company grade or the supervisory special agent level, you kind of keep the train on the tracks and keep the trains running on time.
Right.
The enterprise perspective, then you're laying down enough track for that train to keep moving forward. And so it takes a little bit of a shift. I'm enjoying my time right now. It's really impactful to see the subtle things change. Culture, people reaching out when they need help, direct community impact where you weren't directly involved in that, but you laid a foundation for that to grow. That said, there's only one FBI director, so there's really no other opportunities. It's just continuing to give back, at this level. But whether it's military or FBI, it's the similarities are leading in high consequence environments where the stakes are high and the margin for error is small. And I think there's opportunities for that to continue to lead in those environments outside of government as well.
So I think about some of the things you shared about, why you've made certain decisions and leading through different levels. I'm curious about how leadership has shown up in your house as a dad and as a husband, thinking about what you experienced with your dad. How do you navigate that in your home life?
It's interesting as you grow older and you gain experience and maturity and in a worldview, and you really start to see the forest through the trees, and leadership manifests in different ways. But as you get married and have kids, then you start to appreciate what your employees are experiencing, stresses and joys as well. It forces you to be disciplined and to focus on what your priorities are. And it's tough when you're in a high consequence environment to say, yep, families first, can't do that. Well, there's a mass shooting, you're going to have to go. So there has to be a little bit of flexibility. But all things equal, focusing on the family is really the sunlight, that helps us grow. And it shifts your mind towards giving back in preparing the future generations, which just happened in the blink of an eye for us. As I'm driving in, we go past the buff where we were commissioned. I'm like, my God, 27 years have passed. So now the focus shifts on providing for the family and thinking, what kind of world do I want my girls to live in? And it equates to the FBI, because I want the FBI to be an organization that agents and analysts and professional support staff folks not only serve for 20 years, but that my daughters want to join and they want to do 20 years. So a pendulum shift more towards what, not just delivering results for today, but continuing to grow on what the future looks like.
Pulling that a little bit further, what do you hope that your girls see in you as a leader? You know, the way that your dad was your hero and you looked up to him. What are you hoping your girls see in you? The traits.
You know, it's funny, they're 9 now, so I think they could care less.
Maybe what they don't want to see you doing. No, I'm just kidding.
But, you know, in the future, I want them to be able to see the value of integrity, of service, and of excellence. In this recognition that life is so precious and short. And I want them to leave it all on the field. And, you know, when their day comes, to be able to say, you know what, I did it. I lived a full life. I was supported, loved, you know, whatever it is they want to get into. It doesn't have to be law enforcement or anything. Like, I just want them to excel and enjoy themselves, but just recognize how phenomenal life is and how short it is. And you got to find your spark and just go for it.
That's amazing. And I think about your comment earlier about we're really good at helping others know what they should be doing, but maybe not the best at taking our own advice. How are you doing that and taking care of yourself today?
So for me, it's running. Everybody's got something that they need to unplug, decompress. From my time from high school through the academy, military, and now it's running. It gets a little slower as we get older, right?
Note to self, do not plan to go running with Mark. Got it.
But everybody needs time to unplug and take off all the masks. FBI agent, Air Force member, husband, parent, friend. You just need to take the mask off, and you just need to breathe. And that's what does it for me, being outside and breathing. And one of my assignments was in our San Diego field office, which was spectacular, but being in water was another area that I really found energized me and, you know, it made me whole. But yeah, running is what does it now. And I make it a point that no matter how busy I am, I've got to run at least once a week.
Okay. What's your distance that you're running to give yourself this time to unplug and?
Now, not fast. Now, this isn't a sprint. It's more of a marathon. But I haven't done any marathons. That's a little too much for me. I'm in the 5 to 8 mile range. That seems to be the sweet spot. And then here in Colorado, it's being out in nature. But in DC, to be able to run the monuments, every single time, and I've done it hundreds of times, but every time you go past those monuments, and you put your hand on the Washington Monument, or you go up to the Lincoln Memorial and you stand where Dr. Martin Luther King stood, and you see that perspective. I just get this sense of history and appreciate the decisions that were made and the consequential events that happened over time, and the stability of institutions, in that leaders way above us stood the test of time, were resilient, and were able to navigate unthinkable challenges. Then so too should we. And I find a sense of I guess comfort or shared experience, although that's a whole different level for those level of leaders, but that really helps fuel me.
And I can actually see that. Just picture you doing that. I want to ask you, what is something you're doing every day to be better at? Fill in the blank. Your leadership, your craft. What's something you're doing every day?
I think it's being disciplined and focused, definitely running and being physical, but balancing the time with family and friends and work. It sometimes it comes across as selfish. I think particularly people that are service oriented consider that selfish. But again, like they say when you're on the plane, you've got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help others. So that's not selfish. You're telegraphing to others to take care of themselves. When I run, I listen to presidential biographies.
Really? I was going to ask you, what's in your ear? No, I'm just kidding.
Which I don't know if it's
Wow.
the cadence of but again, to understand decisions from the past and when, our country was at pivotal points, how we responded, that helps fulfill me. I think, becoming a student of leadership from being a cadet to now and finding different ways and understanding, whether it's private sector, other public sector entities, how they navigate things, because it's very, very similar when it comes to, motivating people, managing programs, delivering results, grappling with emerging tech, new different types of threats. So I do a lot of reading in that space to be able to be a more kind of holistic leader and not have on horse blinders just specific to government.
Has there been one lately that's really stuck with you, or that you've listened to while you're running, or that you read that has continued to evolve the way you're thinking, you approach leadership?
I think it's John Dickerson has a book called The Hardest Job in the World. And it's about the presidency. And it's not one individual president. It crosses party lines and in decades, but it's more of those themes that when you think back, they didn't have the technology we did, but like these fundamental themes are the same of how do you, motivate people? How do you respond to the operating environment? How do you handle complex challenges? And I just felt a sense of reassurance or support and understanding on things, through the course of time, that we may not have all the answers, but collectively, people are the potential energy of the organizations, and they're going to deliver. They're going to hit it out of the park. You just have to support them. Mm.
Well, we have viewers and listeners that kind of span from, young cadet hopefuls, cadets, graduates and family members. What's something that if you could tell yourself years ago, maybe as a cadet, that you should say, you should be thinking about this now, because in 27 years from now, it's gonna matter? What would you share?
I think, first of all, I wish I would have had more fun.
I think I've seen you smile more now than.
I mean, it's just such a pressure cooker, yes. And you don't want to let anybody down, and you don't know what the future holds. And I've got to do this, I got to do that, It's just breathe a little bit and enjoy it. Like, you don't recognize you're really in a pivotal point in your life. So that I think that's one thing. I think the other, for cadets and prospective cadets to recognize, is that the FBI, like the military, is temporary. You're going to retire probably young. You do 20 years, and the way our systems are set up and the way the world is now, rarely are you just going to go fishing at age 40 or 50.
Right.
You may have a second act, you may have a third act. And so you've got to really have the long view in mind. And it's okay not to have all the answers. Life will throw you some curveballs here and there. You've got to do what fulfills you at the time, and doors will open. But you just got to have that faith that things are going to work out.
Did you have that, you think, back then, or are you just looking back on it now recognize that?
I don't know. I think partially I had it then. Those academy years are really, really tough. And like we were chatting before, like, well, once you leave, that was it. I had no intention of coming back. And it's kind of like a boomerang. Distance and time makes the heart grow fonder. And then you recognize, what you've learned here and how special this place was. And I think back, I think staying busy and active is what got me through. There's nothing worse than that first holiday break in December. Right? When you go back to your friends and they're at local schools and you see all the stuff they're doing, and then you got to come back.
Yes.
And that is such the
comeback piece.
Yes. Do you have the, intestinal fortitude to come back? That was really, really tough. But now I see like that, the academy, left an indelible mark on me and changed the trajectory of my life. And I think back, like I said, I'm the only person in my family to have ever left Michigan, and what life would have been. You think the earth is flat until you get out and see there's a whole big world out there and a ton of opportunities. And as I've gotten in this role, particularly as a special agent in charge in Denver, interact more with military leaders here in Colorado and Wyoming and start to reconnect with people and see that this long blue line, it spans everything.
Yes.
We are everywhere.
It is
and
enduring,
down the chain,
isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Across the world. But you have no idea what good stuff lies ahead if you just stay the course, and your life will be changed in fundamentally spectacular ways.
You couldn't end it better than that. I guess I want to just ask you this final question. Is there anything we didn't talk about today that you would like to make sure you make mention of?
No, but let me give one piece of advice for future cadets and cadettes. And this, I think I read this in a book before I came, but this is what helped me survive.
Okay.
Go to bed every night at 10 o'clock. There's folks that try to do the all-nighters.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Every night I went to bed at 10 o'clock and dealt with the consequences on the back end. And I think that ability to recharge and rest served me well.
Do you still go to bed at 10 o'clock now?
I try. Well, now it's more like 9 or 8:30 as I've gotten older. But I think like you've got to recharge and sleep. And that's one of the things the Academy teaches you is you are not going to get everything done. You're not going to muscle your way through this. You can try. You're going to end up tired. But this is a team sport. Life is a team sport. You've got to do the best you can and get up and do it again the next day. But you're just not going to get it all done. So you got to take care of yourself. Well,
that really does kind of bring it home. Does this time that you've been kind of experiencing in your life through the active duty service, through the FBI, you said to yourself, you kind of look back at, maybe why your dad made some decisions. Do you feel like you've gotten to a point where you've had closure now?
Yes and no. I think I've gotten to a point where I've got all the answers I can. But I'm at peace with what had happened. And I try to, leverage the time I have with my wife and girls to be present, and to be a good role model, and just to be able to support them and help them thrive.
Well, I think you've been an incredible role model. You've been an incredible friend through all these years. This conversation has been one that's been really rooted in just understanding who you are, where you're at, and then how to navigate from that place. And I think that's why you've been one of the reasons why you've been just so successful and why you're able to lead so many people through so many different crises. So I thank you for being on Long Blue Leadership. This has been a true treat for me. But again, I know that all of our listeners and our viewers have enjoyed this as well.
Well, thank you, Navir. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, as I think back on our conversation today, there are several things that stand out. I think one thread that we really need to think about is taking care of ourselves and others, knowing where we're at, thinking about mental resilience and really post-traumatic growth, being able to move forward and seek help when you need it. I think part of our conversation today as leaders is not everything is easy, and certainly you have a network that supports you. And so one of the ways that my classmate Mark has really highlighted to me is lean into your network, utilize the resources that are there for you. And then you can not only help yourself, but you can help others as well. So it's been an incredible conversation, one that I look forward to listening to again and sharing with others as well.
This Long Blue Leadership conversation was recorded on Tuesday, March 31st, 2026.